It's 2 o'clock, so I guess I better start. Hi.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. My name's Simon. You may be wondering who the heck is this. I never assume that anybody knows who I am or whatever I've done. So you might want to know what I do, how did I get here, and possibly what you're doing here. I can't answer that, but the rest of it, hopefully I can do it in about 40 minutes or less. So my name's Simon. I come from Nottingham, and I've made video games for the past 40 years. I'm now retired, and this is my story so far. So back in 1975, this is me with 70s wallpaper. I always wanted to make cartoons. This is responsible for most of what Gen X has turned out to be, including myself. But I was always drawing, and I kind of grew up on a diet of this kind of stuff. So the original Hanna-Barbera Tom and Jerry, thank you very much. None of the Gene Deitch stuff or later Chuck Jones, the proper stuff. Bob Godfrey's do-it-yourself film animation show, 1974. There's a fantastic episode where they had Terry Gilliam showing how he did the cutout animations for Monty Python's Flying Circus, which was like, you just take little card cutouts, move them around, fantastic. Whoopee comic, The Art of Ken Reed, with all these amazing, crazy monsters. And then if you ever remember Athena back in the day, the artwork of Guillermo Mordillo, who's this Argentinian artist that did all of these incredible tiny little men, giant hats, big noses, Asterix the Gaul, loved it. And then my first kind of exposure to anime, which was Marine Boy on BBC One. Anyway, Christmas Eve 1977, I bought that. 95p. I went round to the newsagents, and it absolutely blew my mind. And I was kind of like looking at things like concept art, men making models and telling stories and bringing stories to life just by making stuff. And I'd always wanted to I just got completely into Star Wars from 78 to 80. I drew the pictures, I made spaceships and all this lot. And I really wanted my own cine camera so I could make my own little movies and stuff. Never got one. So in 1981, I was around my friend Philip Vasquez's house, and he showed me a kit that his dad and him had made of a ZX81 from Electronics magazine. It was like, do you want to play Space Invaders? It's like, fantastic. You know, this thing was, say, black and white. Every time it updated, it burst to static and came. But I was like, Phil, that's art on screen. Can I change what these look like? He was like, well, you can make it look like an A or a H or something. I was like, brilliant, I'm in. So I really wanted a computer after that. I saved up, and then in 1982, for my 16th birthday, with my paper round money and my parents throwing in some money, I got a BBC Micro. There's the obligatory bottle of Baby Sham that you had to have at Christmas. Anyway, I got a Saturday job at First Byte Computers in Derby, and met a bunch of regular guys there, 4 names there, Terry Lloyd, Rob Toone, Chris Shigley, Andy Green, who were all regulars, and they were also trying to make games and stuff like that. And Christmas '82, bought this gigantic Microvitek RGB monitor, which I had to carry through the snow in the, so to get to my dad's car. It's huge. But anyway, I kind of got there and started fiddling around, writing code and trying to make my own games. So I started to teach myself BASIC, did a kind of version of Snake and kind of Space Invader-y type sort of games and things like that. And I figured out about 1984 that all these little listings could go in a magazine. And when they paid 50 quid per page, I was like, this is good. So not only did I send them the listing, I sent them a load of drawings and a load of text on how they did it, so that then I could make a little bit extra money. And it was like, this is nice, because I was kind of doing their job a little bit for them by providing them with a load of stuff. So anyway, that went along. And then I also, my first proper published game was back in the time when computer game shops were publishing their own stuff. Say Gremlin Graphics in Sheffield grew out of that. First Byte Computers decided to run a series of tapes. I put my little Star Force lander on the BBC on it and ended up drawing this kind of Ken Reed style monster and the covers for the stuff. So that's technically my first published game, but one that you've never heard of. The one that you might have heard a little bit more of slightly was in 1984, Jet Power Jack. This was me fiddling around with a bit of machine code to do coloured sprites on the BBC. And I was still at school at the time. My friend Stu Gregg came round on one evening and said, you should stick that on a tape and send it away. I was like, really? He was like, yeah. So I sent it away to ANF Software and Micropower. ANF came back and went, it's not 100% machine code, piracy, we can't protect it, so we'll pass. Micropower went, here's a list of 10 things. You can make these changes, we'll happily publish it. I was like, yes. So I made the changes, and it was my first published game whilst I was still at school. So anyway,
I did my A-levels badly. So my backstop was working at Trent Polytechnic, doing a HND in computer studies. It was brilliant. Had a sandwich year in that year, and ended up working in the IBM marketing department there with the 80s hair and all of these other students and what was YTS people doing stuff like building PCs and making sure that sandwiches arrived at sales events and stuff like that kind of thing. And at the end of it, they sort of said, we'd love to see you at the end of the course. I was like, I can never see myself working for a giant American corporation. Hold that thought. So I left after completing my poly and stuff and thought, right, I've got to go into making some kind of code or something, and went and got a job at a company called Lasermaker, writing BCPL. It was the most interesting thing I could find to do, which was basically doing kind of a graphical display system for their typesetting. It's just really boring stuff. About 5 months into doing this, I got a call from my friend Terry. This is not a picture of Terry. Terry said, I've got a job at Gremlin Graphics. We're making Masters of the Universe, the computer game, and I need somebody to help me make little tiny Dolph Lundgrens. I was like, ooh, I'm a bit stuck. What do I do? Do I sit in the cube farm, or do I join the game grid? I can see actually the audience here will get this reference, which is appreciated. So anyway, I got there with my fiancée, Jane, who you can meet if you come over to the booth. She's manning it right at the moment. And I said, what do you think? Making video games is not a real job. She's like, well, just give it a go. The worst thing that can happen is 6 months, the company folds, and then you go back to serious computing. So I went and started doing that. So Gremlin Graphics in Derby, so just kind of a few miles down the road. Started as a graphic artist there, so I worked on Master of the Universe, Skate Crazy, Knight Raider, which was a kind of a Spectrum conversion of a Canadian PC simulation game. And whilst I was there, the first thing I did was grabbed hold of Andy Green and said, right, I've got an Atari ST, I've done some graphics on it, what do I need to get the Atari to work so I can actually start coding again? So he gave me about 12 lines of code, which basically turned the Atari into a big box of memory, and then I just set to work. And one of the things I first started doing was writing little utilities programs that meant I never had to touch a Spectrum, an Amstrad, a Commodore keyboard or art package ever again. I drew all of my art on the Atari and then just gave the programmers at the time the artwork all cut out and ready on disk. So Gremlin went along, but it didn't last for long. Unfortunately, Gremlin's Derby office, Gremlin hit a cash flow crisis, and they turned around and said, we're going to have to shut you down. You can either join us in Sheffield, which is like 40 miles up the M1, which commuting for an hour in the 80s was just unheard of, or take redundancy. We were like, well, you know what? Actually, we'll take the redundancy. So this is the team there of Rob, Chris, Terry, and Andy with the Gremlin sign on the day that all that fell apart. Anyway, about I think it was that evening or a couple of days later, Kevin Norban, who was one of the founders of Gremlin, and their sales manager, Jeremy Smith, came round and said, if you guys want to, we'll set up a new company in the same offices and you just work for us. And we were like, okay. So Core Design was born in exactly the same little offices in Saxon House. We were then turning around trying to find up ideas for games. My coding had got better at that point, and one of the things was we were at that point just a developer for outside things. So we did some game pitches. One of the little teams of our 8 of us, I think it was in the office at the time, worked on a conversion of Action Fighter from the Sega Master System to the home computers. We came up with a little game called Rick Dangerous. This game has followed me around forever. I never, ever thought it would get the reception it did, and that people, and I'll be meeting people today that can remember it and still allow me to get away with it because I'm responsible for most TVs and broken competition pro joysticks in the 80s. I'm very sorry, not sorry. This came out of me and Terry sitting there going, right, what's out at the time that we can do a game based on? And we went through, and I remember distinctly that Black Tiger had just come out in the arcades from Capcom, so that was like sword and sorcery out the way. And one of the things we learned was like, there hasn't been a really good little Indiana Jones game that feels like the feeling that you get at the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's running past all the traps. So I started scribbling. I've got a couple of pages of the original design doc over on my booth. You can see how we managed to convince Firebird to give us thousands of pounds to make it for 4 months. And I basically came up with this idea, and I was like, right, this is how we could make all of these trap works in a very, very small piece of code. And so I was sort of bouncing ideas off Terry going, look, think of all the things that you can come up with, blow darts, falling rocks, whatever. Will it work with this little tiny system that I come up with? And we proved it out. We pitched the thing, it landed, and for 4 months we made this. Lots of little sort of cheats on this one. The screen is 256 pixels wide because that's as wide as the spectrum would go. The sprites are 21 pixels high by 24 pixels wide, which is the hardware size of the Commodore 64. It only either scrolls smoothly vertically or page flips, simply because what we didn't want to do was we were having to create 5 different versions of the game. We didn't want to create 5 different maps as well, because that would have been too big for a tiny little team of 5 of us. So yeah, we turned it out, and it's actually the only game that I've worked on where we actually finished it. It was held for 6 months and then came out 6 months later, because normally every other game that I ever worked on went screaming out the door on fire with day 1 patches later on. But yes, it is peculiar. He's followed me around. It was a complete surprise when the realistic looking artwork box turned up in the thing, because we're thinking, And yeah, I'm responsible for the wah that he makes, because that was me and Terry spending a Tuesday afternoon with a condenser microphone just going making ridiculous noises, and mine was the funniest. So there we go. In my spare time, whilst I was teaching myself how to code, I decided I'd seen Underworld, the Spectrum game, with big sort of maps. I thought, I want to do something like that. So I've kind of been inspired by what was called manga at the point, and the Marine Boys staff and various things. Created this little game called Switchblade. It's a flick screen game. I think 256 screens of stuff going around this kind of cyberpunk sci-fi world, and picking up various different weapons, blowing up monsters, etc. I made this in my spare time over 18 months, which was kind of interesting, because in my full time I was writing Rick Dangerous and all the other games that were subsequent to it, and my coding was getting better at work, whereas I was dealing with rookie code of an evening. And there was a distinct point when I was working on Switchblade that I sort of turned around and was like, right, do I just grind it out and finish this, or do I rewrite the whole thing now I know better? It was like, grind it out. So I did do. We ended up publishing it through Gremlin Graphics, because Core didn't have the cash when I went to Jeremy and said, hey, I've got this. My daughter's got home, because Core couldn't afford to do that. I didn't have anything to do with Switchblade 2, but Switchblade, quite fond of the little guy, and have painted a cover for a newer version of him in more recent years. This is the highlight of my career, St. Greaves' football trivia quiz game. We were asked, this was when football games were just absolute earners and stuff, and we were in a situation where Jeremy came to us and said, Gremlin want us to do either a Streets of Rage style beat-em-up based around the Guardian Angels, the vigilante guys that were in New York patrolling the subways in the 80s, or 2 football games. We're like, I think we'll choose the latter. We only actually did one, and it was this 2000 trivia quiz game thing licensed on St. Greavesy from their ITV show at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoons. We had 10 weeks to do it. Kevin Norburn had to type in all 2,000 questions, and I still don't know who the shrimpers are. The only other thing was, it went gold the night before our wedding, so lovely Jane was sat there by my desk going, right, this better ship, otherwise everything's off. And so 5:30 on the Friday night of June the 2nd, 1989, it went gold on the disc, out the door, got married the following day. And the guys gave me a wedding present at our evening do, came in with this huge box. I'm like stood on stage with the microphone thinking, oh my God, what's this? I've got to think up something funny. It was a copy of the game. 1990 Core Designs, the first game that I ever made that went over budget. This was, the story of this one was, we got the opportunity to do either Judge Dredd or Monty Python. Jeremy came and said, Judge Dredd and Monty Python, Virgin wants us to do one of them. I was like, please let me do Judge Dredd. I want to do the definitive version of the ultimate future cop. And they said, can we do Monty Python? And one of the stipulations from Virgin, and I think I understand why, was we don't want it to be like Rick Dangerous. I think what they actually meant was, we don't want you to just reskin an old game that we've made and try and pass it off on us. So I delved into my memory of all that kind of fandom from the Terry Gilliam stuff when I was a kid, got hold of every single Python book, VHS tape and everything, and just did a deep dive into Python over a weekend, cataloguing absolutely everything and making a list of all of the characters that either appeared in his cartoons that I could take the style of drawing from, or interpreting the live action characters in his style. I ended up coding the Amiga and ST versions and doing all the graphics and all the design for this one. The only problem with Monty Python is it's such a fluid concept. You go and meet with Virgin, you go, hey, what should we do? They end up kind of quoting you back the cheese sketch, and the whole thing comes back, and you go back to the team and go, what did they say? Don't know, but I know the parrot sketch inside out. So we had a lot of time fighting with it. One of the things about the game was the fact that we decided to make it kind of control-based. So the idea being that you take the character of Gumby, rip his head off, Gumby being one of the only characters that all of the Pythons played. And so we do platform sections with him. We rip his head off, put him on the body of a fish, on the body of a bird, and a spring. So you can have multiple different control systems. And we spent a lot of time trying to get it so you were mastering the control, but it always didn't play like fun. And we kept on going, and eventually I think producers changed at Virgin. They went, could you sort of put some of that sort of stuff that you did in Rick Dangerous in? You went, oh, cool. So we were then in this situation where we'd run over budget. We ended up running to kind of 9 months. But for the final 4, I actually had a word with Greg Holmes, who was our manager and office manager, and said, look, we really need to get this out. I've got a plan. What I'll do is I'll take this home. I'll work from home for 7 days on every single animation, sprite, level, all that lot, do all the art for every single format. And on a Monday, I'll come in, give it to the guys, and I'll go back. And I did that for 4 solid weeks, just non-stop. But it got the game out of the door, and we all heaved a huge sigh of relief and moved on from it. And my utmost respect and apologies to everybody on the team, because it was just so hard to try and grasp what we were trying to come up with. And say every time I went down to the Notting Hill offices, it was like, it'd be really good. Could we have the argument sketch in there? And it was kind of the ambition that they were asking for was either a full graphical adventure like Day of the Tentacle on a Spectrum, or a suite of maybe about 60 or 80 mini games on a Spectrum. And it was like, I ain't going to do that. So it was a real learning curve on getting your kind of scope right and understanding what the game is before you start. But we got there, and I'm proud of the artwork. Then Rick Dangerous 2. Microstyle, Microprose by that point, had gotten the thing and came back to us and said we want a sequel. So it was real good fun. Decided not to go and rehash it. We went into the world of Flash Gordon and all of those kind of serial adventures. I suppose the big thing with this one was the trap system. We had incredibly talented coder called Dave Pridmore, who did the Z80 versions and all our audio as well for the games. And we said, well, okay, then I did the original design for the first trap system. Here are all the limitations of it. We want to be able to stop things, start things, synchronize things, or whatever. You went, hang on. So just did a deep dive, and about 2 weeks later came up and went, right, I've got this really complicated piece of code and a really complicated set of data. And the only way that we figured out what was inside Dave's head was we sat there and pair programmed. So it was like looking at his code and literally instruction for instruction, translating with his help to make it work. So it was this wonderful black box that we just pushed bits and data in, and somehow magically something happened with the sprites. And I could never have debugged it without him or put it together. But it worked. We had a load of fun with that, and one of the great things about it was we actually inherited a villain from the first comic, because the first one doesn't have a kind of villain character, but Ian Gibson, the amazing 2000 AD artist, who's one of my favorite artists, wrote a comic book in the first one, had a guy called The Fat Guy, who we went, okay, then we'll take him, make him the bad guy in this, and it was fun, really efficient to work on. We all knew what we were doing and just plowed straight ahead. And say that one of the questions I do get is there ever a Rick Dangerous 3? No, we were never asked to do one, so we just kind of moved on. So where he would have ended up, I don't know. We popped him in a teleporter with a plan that if he ever came out, he'd come out in some other completely different genre and play around with that. Then 1991, core design, Thunderhawk. Two amazingly talented coders, Mark and Sean, turned up with an almost fully formed game, this 3D engine that did helicopter simulation, everything like that kind of thing. It was absolutely mind-blowing. If you remember helicopter simulations and the likes back on the Amiga, it was 25 minutes to fly to a tiny pixel dot, shoot a dot at that dot, and then fly 25 minutes back from the dot. And it was like the stuff that they'd done for the time was so fast, so fluid, and they could actually get, for that time, really detailed models. I was like, well, hang on, why don't we cut right to the action and do the cool stuff? And so I came on board as kind of like a designer on this one, did the HUD graphics, mission design and stuff. And whilst they worked their magic doing all the 3D, but it was the first time I'd ever touched anything 3D from there. Then 92 to 93, Wolfchild. Name of Wolfchild came from designer Bob Churchill, massive fan of goths, dressed like Ian Astbury from The Cult, had a belt with the word Wolfchild on. I was like, that's cool, don't know why, I'm sure there's a game in it. Came up with a kind of combination of Altered Beast, inspired by Capcom, the kind of cool stuff that Bitmap Brothers were doing at the time and everything like that. And I wanted to do much bigger sprites. All of my other characters have been tiny, squashed little kind of things to fit on the Commodore 64. Even with Switchblade, because it was flick screen, I had to make the guy all pudgy. With this, I ended up being able to make full, like, kind of realistic, cool comic book sort of size sprites. The day that I started on this one, the question came down was, Simon, you can't do everything now. What do you want to do? Do you want to be an artist or a coder? I was like, well, you've got better coders than me, so I'll be an artist and a designer. And my school friend, actually, John Kirkland, came on board being my coder. So the two of us worked together. I did the scroller and a load of utilities. John did all the rest. And for a good few months, we put together the original Wolfchild, playing around doing some fun stuff with the Amiga, with loads of color spreads and parallax scrolling and everything like that. And this was at a time when Core started doing all sorts of various different deals about getting their games onto various different systems. So once we had shipped on the Atari and the Amiga, all of a sudden I was doing a conversion to the Mega Drive, then the Sega CD, then the Commodore SNES, and then the Master System, the Sega Master System, which meant I probably spent the best part of 2 years adding more colors into sprites and doing various different versions and everything like that. It blew my mind when I was moved on to the SNES, where the SNES had colors that I'd never even played around with, and more palettes than possible. And I discovered that actually trying to put extra colors and extra detail into sprites is always the wrong way. And it taught me a lesson that you always draw something to the highest level and take it down rather than trying to force detail in. And then the most fun part of this was the conversion to the Master System, working with Sean Dunleavy, basically trying to take an entire Amiga game and pack it into something that would fit into the Game Gear, where we just absolutely optimized the heck out of everything. So if an enemy didn't move, he was built out of characters in the background and we just deleted him, or we just moved maybe his arm or something like that kind of thing. And ruthlessly going through every single map, counting every single instance of a graphic. If it wasn't used about 50 times, it got replaced by something else, and was really kind of going from the excesses of the SNES and the Amiga to going right down to trying to pack something that shouldn't have fit into a tiny box into a tiny box. Then I got asked to do Asterix. Core had done an Asterix game before. That was very much of a kind of a surreal sideways platformer. Looked beautiful, hadn't got very much. Sega had come to Core and said, we want another game. We want to call it Asterix and the Power of the Gods. Don't know why, but we just like the title. So I joined Stefan and Rich Morton to be the designer on this one. With my extensive fandom of Asterix from being a kid, I did what I did on the Pythons, which was, I'll have all the Asterix comics, please. Terrible thing. I actually got paid for a few days to read every single one of the Asterix books with a notepad, taking down the stuff. And one of the things that I realized was, well, two things actually. Every Asterix book always starts with a map of Europe, so let's use that as our kind of overworld. And the other thing was the magic potion is the one thing that all the Asterix books have in common. So I went through and found every instance in 40 Asterix books of what was considered an authentic magic potion ingredient. So then I could go back with the design document and go right, we go here, we get a magic potion ingredient. It is this. It is from Asterix and the Gladiator, page 26, panel 3, whatever, and give them this huge bibliography so we could submit it to Sega. Sega then passed it on to Les Editions Albert René, went well, and so we pushed ahead of it. And the other thing I learned on this one was I had a secret plan. I designed an entire adventure like this, and then I had a secret page which had a cut-down version of the adventure, and I told Steph and Rich, let's build this first, because at some point or other somebody's going to come along and go, we need it sooner, or you've run out of time. So if we build this kind of skeleton, we'll look like absolute heroes, because we won't have done other stuff. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. We got the game out, and the real wonderful thing was, after it had been published, I got a fax from Les Editions Albert René. They brought out the game at one of the Asterix conventions, apparently those are the things, and they said it was the most authentic Asterix game at the time. So that really made me happy, and little tiny me who'd grown up reading the comic books, really, really pleased. And the fact that I'd actually honoured the work that the fans wanted out of the game. Then 1994, this was Bubba and Sticks. This was a joke that completely backfired on me. This was the time of flashback in another world where people were doing lots and lots of running around in car parks, videoing themselves and drawing rotoscope graphics. Looked beautiful, and at that time Jeremy came to me and went, I want to do kind of like a thing, it's like an adventure, kind of an Indiana Jones type, I'm thinking, okay, type character who kind of runs around, he kind of raids tombs, and he's got a stick. And he can do all sorts of stuff with a stick. And I'm thinking, okay, right. And we should do it with rotoscope graphics. And I'm thinking, it's getting on for November. I'm going to be running around the car park and then tracing over bad versions of me. And forever, I'm going to see bad versions of me trying to be a stuntman. No, I don't fancy that. And also, the other thing was, when you say a stick, do you mean a stick that's like this, a stick that's like this, a stick that's... Do you use it as a javelin? Do you use it as... What happens when you throw the stick? Do you have to go and pick it up? All of this sort of stuff. So I was busy on other bits and pieces, so I just kept putting this off. Jeremy kept coming back and saying, man with a stick. I was like, oh. So I teamed up at that point with a wonderful guy, Billy Allison, who taught me so much about animation. He'd come from the TV world of TV animation. And he and I shared an office, and I said, we're going on about this man with a stick. So we went round to my house one Tuesday evening, got a massive piece of paper and thought, I'm just going to take the mick out of it. And we're just going to draw loads and loads of cartoons of what you could do with a stick. And we probably had about 80 or 90 little tiny sketches, from sticks that are this big to sticks that are that big. We drew everything conceivable. You're using it like a snorkel, you're using it like a baseball bat, you're using it like a polvo. Some of the things were impossible, some of the things were illegal. Anyway, we turned up and I went, Jeremy, man with a stick's not going to work. I mean, we've come up with all of these ideas or whatever. He went, well, in that case, just do that. So we teamed up with John Kirkland and Mark Watson, locked ourselves away in a little tiny room for about 9 to 12 months and went insane. I worked on all the background design and everything like that kind of thing under the guidance of Billy, whose amazing character designs and animation brought all of the characters to life. Bubba originally began as a giant long-necked lizard. We spent an awful lot of time trying to make Bubba work, because every single game character, if you remember everything from your Sonic the Hedgehog to Mario, they're small and squat. Billy wanted to break every rule in the book by making him tall and thin, and I would spend a lot of time trying to manipulate how we could do the collision for him to make it work. And we did this insane kind of thing where you've got Bubba with an alien character called Sticks, who is a stick who you can throw away, use as a baseball bat, he'll fly back to, which solved all the problems, and had a lot of fun. All I can really remember of that is just going slowly insane late at night every evening, getting shortcake biscuits and cups of tea from the Shell garage, and just laughing hysterically whilst we made this game. Don't know whether anybody's remembered it or whatever, but we had fun making it. Then 94 to 95, Dragonstone came out. Me and Barry Irvin worked on that one. The original designer artist on Dragonstone that had set the whole thing up, he moved to America, so the project was halfway done, and we didn't have the internet to do any of that sort of thing. So I stepped in there, picked up all the stuff, copied his style, and then built the adventure. And then Shell Shock, this was the time when everybody was getting Silicon Graphics workstations. Suddenly Core had a huge number of these giant blue machines that cost tens of thousands of pounds, even in the 90s, because Donkey Kong Country had done that amazing work, and it was like, do something amazing with them. I was like, well, I have no team. It's me. So I learned how to do wavefront and kinemation and everything, and we had the BC Racers scaling sprite engine that we'd just done to do the kind of like a Mario Kart based on the Chuck Rock characters. And it was like, well, if I take that and make the sprites look like tanks and things, and we surround it with a bunch of characters. At the time, a guy called Guy Miller, who'd come from Rare, who'd worked on things like Killer Instinct and Battletoads, and had really kind of learned how to sell games to an international market, whereas I've been working in a very, very kind of like UK-based provincial market. We hit it off, and so at that time, Guy was like, let's make everything different. Let's have female characters in our game. Let's, push things. So back in the 1990s, we had an all-minority cast being made by a bunch of white guys in Derby. We wrote a script for it that was sent over to Hollywood. There's a load of actors wrote and recorded it. We ended up with a San Francisco 49ers guy who was also a rapper in his spare time doing the theme music for it. And I had a hell of a fun time making what was kind of like a combination of Thunderbirds and Public Enemy and a tank, and doing all of this kind of crazy design stuff, because I was kind of in a situation where I could churn out a lot of graphics, but I didn't have a team. And so by the time the team actually assembled, it was like, here's all the sprites, here's loads of this stuff. And so I actually left Core with that going. So yes, little anecdote before I leave Core behind. I did get a little tiny bit of involvement in Tomb Raider. We had a situation where Toby Gard had joined us at Core, had worked on BC Race, had done a fantastic job of that, and had an idea of doing a 3D adventure game. And at the time, Guy was pushing for a lot of sort of difference. And so rather than doing an Indiana Jones type game, Alex and Toby, Guy and Toby had sort of got their heads together. I think even Toby had suggested it, of actually having a female character at the head of the game. And I remember being called into the office because there was this incredible illustration Toby had done, with the first version of which she was all sort of pith helmet and pigtails, kind of like all a bit sort of like this. And I remember being asked, what do you think? And I was like, I think the idea is fantastic, except I don't think she looks like she raised tombs. She looks more like she should get rescued from tombs. So I said to Toby, have you ever seen Tank Girl? He was like, no. I said, right, I'm bringing in all my Jamie Hewlett comics. And so what then Toby did was took the essence of Tank Girl, Belle from Beauty and the Beast, because that was in the cinemas at the time with a little piece of stringy hair, and came up with Laura Cruz, who then ultimately became Lara Croft. So from there, I went up to Acclaim Studios Teesside. I live down here. I went up to the sunny shores of Stockton-on-Tees and Middlesbrough. Actually went up there and worked on College Slam. This was when I went up there for the interview. Basically, they said, "Are you an artist or a designer?" I was like, "Well, you've got better artists than me, but I've got some design skills." Echoing kind of what happened to me on Wolfchild. So I inherited this project. It was all flying along, team absolutely in flight, doing multiple versions across multiple formats of this basketball game. It was the third iteration of the NBA Jam franchise. And when I came on board, Nick, who was my project manager, said, this is like we've all set off on boats heading for America. Some of us are going to end up in Alaska. Some of us are going to end up in Mexico. I don't quite know what to do. So I spent most of my time just running around for the first few weeks, talking to numerous Martins, Daves, Steves, and Jasons and Alexes, going, do you know what you're doing? And gradually putting together a design document, which then brought everything together and gave us all a kind of a platform to go through and finish off the game. So that was it was kind of more of an organisation and a design sort of thing to do. And say, great thing about working at Teesside, huge welcoming family. I left Core because it was just, by that point it had got really, really frantic and had what I now know were big mental health problems just caused by miles and miles and miles of stress. And so actually going and meeting everybody in Stockton-on-Tees, although I was living away during the week, and Jane and my kids who came along after that were down in Nottingham, it was kind of the best place to go, and this wonderful family. So anyway, did College Slam, and then got the opportunity to make something really, really big. This was Shadowman. So Acclaim had bought the rights to Valiant Comics, which was a small line of comic books, and done a game called Turok Dinosaur Hunter for the N64, which was a hit. Myself and actually Guy from Core, we'd actually both gone together to Teesside, and we were experts in pitching original projects. These guys were a conversion house that were picking up stuff from the Americans. And we said, well, look, we can get your guys, because you're really, really talented, to pitch original projects. So we came up with a load of different designs. They were sent over to New York. New York said, we like them, and we like some of the ideas in them. Don't want to do any of them, but we've got these comics. What do you think? And one of them was this really cool comic that just got started called Shadowman, about a guy who passes over from the real world of New Orleans into this kind of voodoo dead side, where he becomes a kind of voodoo god that can walk between the worlds of the living and the dead. So I got to live out some of the stuff that I'd seen in those books when I was a kid, where you're kind of working with a huge team, building up all the comics book, making these 3D models and bringing stories to life. It was the first time I'd actually had to do proper 3D level design. My story about that one was, I sat there in my office building a spiral staircase. Took me all afternoon. I was like, I can't do this for the whole thing, and realized what I actually had to do was create a load of like architect's plans for these big complicated maps and level designs, pass those off to the artist, who would then build them in 3D, and then we would iterate them from there. And I've actually got, if you pop over to my table, some of the original maps there, you can see all the little details of what we did. But yeah, fantastic experience. We got known as Zelda's evil twin. We started making it for the Sega Saturn and the PC. By the end of it, it came out on the Dreamcast. The Saturn version got dropped. The PC version came out. We made it for the N64, and we did a version for the PlayStation 1, which sadly came too late. We actually it was the decision to make it came too late in the day. We were set and locked to drop the game in a particular quarter to meet the financials, and bless him, Les Long, who was our genius lead programmer, was actively begging us to delay the release of the PS1 because he only needed a few more weeks to make it better. Unfortunately, he said that we were in a situation where it would cost them more money in fines and missing deadlines if it didn't meet the quarter, so we had to pass the PlayStation 1 out. But it's always been one of those kind of ones that we always felt was like painful, because we knew where it could have been, and unfortunately the NASDAQ didn't want to play that game. But yeah, so had a tremendous time playing around with a load of stuff. I got to wear a motion capture suit for some of the stuff. I ended up doing the voice of Jack the Ripper in the things, because we were doing a script read-through, and Guy went, you can do that.
I also got to do Avery Marks, who is one of the serial killers.
So I had some surreal moments where you're sitting across from professional actors in a sound booth acting, and you're going, okay, I don't know whether I'm supposed to be here, but I had a lot of fun doing it. Whilst I was there, one of the guys in the office, a guy called Alex Ward, who's been a friend for many, many years now, met him. He was kind of their A&R guy at the time, who would go out and find new studios. We'll bookmark Alex, because he'll become important later. So we did Shadowman, and then rolled on to Shadowman 2, Shadowman Second Coming, which was a bigger sequel for the new PlayStation 2. Myself and Guy put together the script, the stuff. But Acclaim had gone through a cycle of of basically job cuts and everything like that, and was shutting studios and everything. And it was one of those things where you could see the writing was on the wall. The original founders of the studio that was Acclaim Studios, Teesside, Darren and Jason Falkus, they'd left and set up on their own, and you're going, yeah, we're not going to be around for that much longer. So actually at that point it was like, I'm going to head south, going to go back, sleep in my own bed, and say goodbye to these wonderful people up north. Yeah, had to. I put out my CV and got some job offers and headed south. And in fact, actually, about 2 years later, Acclaim finished Shadowman 2 and closed up. But my buddy Nick came and worked with me later, and we actually found some places for some of the guys that we'd worked with up north on new projects as it was. But yeah, so then I went to work for Infogram Manchester. Shortest job I think I've ever had. I thought, Manchester, closer to Derby, that'll be all right. I then became acquainted with the M6, or changing trains at Stoke and Sheffield. Wasn't quite as easy as I thought. But yeah, I basically worked there on a version of Superman that didn't happen. Tim, my boss, had hired me saying, there's a new Xbox coming out, here's the controller. This huge kind of thing. We wanted to make a version of Superman for it. So I was like, brilliant. I ended up having the privilege of meeting with all the comic book writers on the Superman comic at the time. They explained the differences between comic book Superman and animated series Superman. Animated Superman series Superman can kill because TV writers don't care about continuity. But this was always based on the comic book, so he had to really do the stuff. So I came up with a design for it, and in some idle conversation, found out that they were also making a Superman at their Sheffield office. I was like, can I go over the Pennines and go and find out about it? Like, sure. So I met their lovely producer, Rob, who showed me Superman, the animated series, the game. And I was like, to be honest, you're solving all the same problems I'm doing. So back to Tim. Tim, can we find out why we're making 2 Superman games before I go and spend literally millions and hire loads of people for you? Yeah. So he popped on the train, went down to London, went to Infogram thing, met with 2 lovely people from marketing. I went, why are we doing 2 Supermen? He went, to be honest, we don't know, and we're glad that you're asking. So there and then we agreed that we weren't going to do it, that if they were going to do something for the Xbox, they'd just pass it over to Rob's team, they're doing conversion. So we're heading back up on the train, and Tim's going, I'm ever so sorry. You can work on the Looney Tunes game for me and all that. I was like, well, thanks, Tim. Don't feel bad, because I kind of got a job down at Electronic Arts, and they want me to work on Harry Potter. He was like, oh, Electronic Arts are really nice. I've had an interview there. They're lovely, aren't they? I was like, yes, they are. I said, anyway, about 2 years later, I actually saw Tim after the Infogram studio had folded, and he was working on the 2nd floor. So everything worked out in the end. But yes, my ambitions to come back home suddenly moved me south. So I ended up sleeping in a rented room in Woking for many years after this kind of thing, and then bringing everything home because Jane and the family were here. So yeah, I had the privilege and pleasure of working on all of these Harry Potter titles. This was, I landed in October the 20th, 2000. They already had the PlayStation 1, Game Boy Advance and PC versions of Philosopher's Stone in flight at the time. And this was at the point where nobody had seen a Harry Potter movie. People had read the books, and everybody was playing fast and loose going, well, it's magic, it can be anything. And that was kind of like that sort of thing where you see somebody giving Luke Skywalker a chainsaw, and you're going, no, that's not got to be in the Star Wars game. Myself and my buddy Guy, who'd come down and got the creative director job on this and given me the shout and said, we need a lead designer, became what we termed the fiction police, which was going around sort of playing whack-a-mole with all sorts of crazy law-breaking things, because we knew that everything had to pass through J.K. Rowling, and she wasn't going to have any of it. So we kind of were, sorry, not sorry, Argonaut, you can't do this, boink. And we just spent a load of time doing that on the first one, whilst building up for the second one. Chamber of Secrets on PlayStation 2 came out 2 years after 2 years after I joined to be in conjunction with the second movie. We did, this was done with the old Bullfrog team that had worked on Theme Hospital, Dungeon Keeper and stuff like that. And we did the PlayStation 2 version. Eurocom up in Derby did the GameCube version. We did a lot of sort of working with them. And ironically, I actually spent some time sleeping in my own bed for the first time in about 8 years. Because I could actually pop round to see them in Derby at the time. So yeah, had the delight of working the way through these. Various different things happened. We started, Warner Brothers didn't really want anything to do with us because they were making the movies, we were making the games, we were separate, but we built up a relationship with Warner Brothers and gradually over time got to get some of the art guys to go over to the sets. I was privileged on the later ones to actually go on the set and see what work had been done. If you ever get the opportunity to go to the Harry Potter experience down there, go see it. The artistry in the set is astonishing, and so pleased that more people get to see that because I was just blown away. Big thing with Potter was what I did with Monty Python, what I did with Asterix. Read the books inside out and basically turned around and went, right, I'm putting my ego over there. My job is to act as a conduit to bring the fans what they want. And we pushed and pushed really hard. Myself and Andy Kerridge, who was my designer on this one, particularly on these two, making the most explorable and accurate Hogwarts we could do. There was a time when we went to do Goblet of Fire. There was very much a case of marketing wanted a multiplayer on-screen thing, and we had to drop the exploring element. We brought it back for Order of the Phoenix because basically a lot of fans had turned around and gone, oh, we liked going around Hogwarts. Can we have that back? So on the final Potter that I worked on, myself and Kelvin, who was the art director, took all of the various different plans that we had from all our notes from the books, from the previous games, from the models that they used in filming, and also the various different fragments of location shoots from like Oxford and all that lot, and pieced together what we did at the time was the most accurate to the movies and still accurate to the books version of Explorable Hogwarts you could possibly have, which was really, really cool to be able to deliver. And then, had an amazing time. It was really fantastic to be absolutely the heart of the zeitgeist and to be kind of turning around and standing there going 150 to 250 people, we're going that way, and actually be in charge of that at a time where you really were seeing this thing cranking out, and it was the absolute pulse of the zeitgeist at the time. So anyway, I then got a call from Alex Ward, my friend from Acclaim. He'd gone and become creative director at Criterion Games, who had then subsequently been bought by Electronic Arts. And he phoned me up and said, Simon, you want to stay with Potter, or do you want to play with like cars and guns and explosions? I was like, well, I'll move to Criterion, which is just in Guildford, so just down the road. And I joined Criterion. They had got the Burnout Paradise driving game in flight at the time, so they knew what they were doing. So basically, I got to sort of muck in and just help the team. And I kind of have an attitude, and I've always done it across. If somebody asks if it can be done, if I've got half an idea, I'll volunteer for it and just try it. Because if nobody else is going to do it, I'll give it a go. So I ended up building websites. Myself and my friend Jez Chubb did a podcast, which was weekly kind of like updates on what the game was, called Crash TV. Worked on their live front end, which was serving up all the news and everything like that. And also did a load of game pitches that never made it. Went to Japan, pitched to Nintendo, all sorts of stuff. Discovered that pitching a game at Electronic Arts is one of the hardest things ever, because this behemoth of a gigantic American corporation, yes, I know, I swore I was never going to work for one, because they will commit 1,000% to it with all the money that they will do, the game has got to be absolutely right to convince them to pick it up. So had an amazing time there, and then 2009 I decided was going to be my time to finally come home, because after that point I'd done 13 years of living during the week in either a rented accommodation or a flat or whatever, and I wanted to sleep in my own bed for the night. So I put my feelers out, and I put a little notice out to my friend Hugh at Eurocom, and Hugh went, oh yeah, come join us. I was like, fantastic. So I said my goodbyes to Alex and Fiona and the lovely team at Criterion. They were like, no, we totally understand. We're always here. We'd love to work with you again. But, you know, we totally understand you need your family. So I moved back home to Derby. And I didn't know what I was working on. Hugh said they were super secret because they actually always had multiple projects running for various different people like Capcom and Disney and stuff like that sort of thing. So they're super secret. Said, it's going to be cool, but no, we'd love to have you. So January the 2nd, 2009, I turned up in the car park and as Hugh said, so pleased to be able to sort of finally say what you're working on. We just want you to rebuild one of the bestest games ever, legendarily or whatever. My jaw hit the floor. It was like, okay, right. So you want me to just make GoldenEye for you? All right. Not daunting at all. It's like, well, you've got 18 months. It's for Activision. It's on the Wii. Yeah. It's got to be Daniel Craig, not Pierce Brosnan. Okay. Eon have said they don't really want any background in the game that Pierce Brosnan has been in because it wouldn't be right for Daniel to be in Pierce's shoes. Okay, so you want me to change the levels as well. And if you can change the story as well, that would be good. Okay, so I did spend a little bit of time at Eon Productions convincing them what the plot of GoldenEye, how deconstructing it literally and going, this is how your movie works. You have to have a Sean Bean character. He's got to be this. You've got to, GoldenEye can't be some nebulous AI or something like that. It has to be a weapon system. It can't be some kind of hacker group. It has to be a nation state with nuclear weapons and all this lot. And eventually they were like, okay. So we kind of managed to wrangle it to be a modernized version of GoldenEye and holding all the things. To their credit, they did bring us a Hollywood scriptwriter. They gave us access to Daniel Craig's stunt double, who we came and brought into the mocap studio. Amazing guy, him and Damien Walters, who's just about to create a stunt academy in Derby and who was done all sorts of like crazy parkour stuff like the Prince for Hellboy 2, came in and did as the mocap. It was just astonishing watching these guys throw each other around. You go, you only met 2 moments ago. If I tried that in a car park, I'd probably injure myself and break my neck and bad things would happen. We ended up with the cast doing all the stuff. Apparently Judi Dench is lovely and couldn't do enough for us. And we basically had this thunderous kind of 18 months trying to get everything in. We initially split the team into 2 halves. We had a multiplayer team who were going as close as they could do to getting the kind of GoldenEye multiplayer gameplay in. We had a single player team. Mike Robinson, my producer, spent more time on gun handling than is sane. I started kicking off with it, and we originally pitched it to Activision as being very much kind of like stealth and physicality based, because one of the things was about the original GoldenEye was you really felt first person, and one of the things about seeing Daniel Craig coming out of Casino Royale was that kind of physicality of grappling and everything. So we said, well, what we'll do is we'll motion capture all the stuff, so then you take these guys down, you slam them on the floor and everything. So we had all these amazing cool moves, and like Bond, you're going to be really doing loads and really smart stealth where you're taking guys out, because that was again one of those things that you could do in the original GoldenEye, and kind of channel the spirit of that. That was great. And then Activision released Modern Warfare 2. Suddenly the call for giant explosions, exploding helicopters, things falling from the sky, scripted events went through the roof. So we ended up kind of splitting the single player team into multiple divisions to just try and pack as many explosions, scripted events and exploding helicopters into everything. And everything went into overdrive, and then we were kind of like the return to work on in January of 2010. We had 9 months to get out the door, and I didn't see Jane or the kids 7 days a week, most hours. We were literally just grinding it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day from January through till September. One big thing I ended up doing was with one artist and one programmer, I did the entire of the tank section, because that was about to be dropped, and it was like, if somebody can take it on. So I ended up kind of like working my way through getting this, and the amount of exploding helicopters we ended up in that thing, I think was, well, we had a joke, there was the 50-cent game where every boss was a helicopter gunship. We had more helicopters than Fiddy by the end of it. But yeah, it was absolutely exhausting, loads and loads of fast food, very, very late nights, cramming this thing, and we got it out of the door. And I did have one holiday in 2010 in April. I ended up going over to the West Coast. And whilst out there, Jane and I decided we're going to renew our vows at the Elvis Chapel. And as would happen, my friend Alex from Criterion was in the country, came down and was my best man. We were driving around and he said, "Oh, when are you going to come back to Criterion?" I was like, "Well, if you can move the office north by about 40 minutes, I can probably commute it." He went, "I'm sure we can do something about you working from home." I was like, "What? Fantastic." So stay in touch. We're doing a Need for Speed. I'll see what happened. So then came the easiest interview I've ever had. The car park at McDonald's on Mackworth Island. "Hi, Symes, when do you want to start?" It's like, okay. So I became I worked out an arrangement where I actually stayed in the Travelodge down in Guildford one night a week, so 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, and was the lead designer on the multiplayer Need for Speed Most Wanted, the 2012 version of my Criterion, where we had a load of fun with a small, tight team of about 10 guys, some of the smartest, nicest guys I've ever worked with, coming up with racing around this kind of fictional version of Boston, doing challenges and stuff like that. And I actually started to roll out becoming an artist again, because we had kind of like a system of unlockable license plates. Nobody had the time to put it in schedule, so I just picked up my Photoshop, took crap loads of screenshots, and then built up all of this sort of stuff, so we'd have loads and loads of unlockables. So that was real good fun thing. From there, 2013, there were a load of pitches after Need for Speed that just didn't land. Alex and Fiona, who were the heads of Criterion, they were tired of the big corporate kind of system, so they decided to leave. And so, as my experience had learned from the time at Core and the time at Teesside, when the founders leave, you start kind of looking for other opportunities. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come home. So I came home for 6 months and thought, I'm just going to retrain myself as become a 3D designer. I got Unity out, taught myself C# and basically refreshed my skills, and then got a call. Would you like to come and join Three Fields? And so Three Fields Entertainment, I was working from home with my friends Alex and Fiona and some of the guys that I worked with on the multiplayer team on Most Wanted. And we then set off as a little team of 7 of us, making small games very quickly using the Unreal Engine. So yeah, it was a great time. The first thing that we did was a game called Dangerous Golf, which was kind of a showcase of Unreal Engine physics. You basically try and do the ultimate trick shot in a room full of glassware, explosives or whatever. So the idea was that we got to learn how to blow things up, shatter things, and you basically kind of tee off. There's a hole that you've got to sink the ball in, and you can ricochet it off absolutely everywhere, take control of it, set it on fire and sink it, and do loads and loads of arcade scoring. I ended up doing the artwork for the cover, all of the HUD work and all the animation and everything once they blew things up. And because of course we were a small team, it didn't cost much. The tools were all pretty much free. You only kind of pay for Unreal when you actually start publishing something. And because there were only small of us, we didn't have to sell that many. So went on from there, 2014, 2016, we dabbled with VR to tie in with the release of PlayStation VR. This one was a kind of simple kind of gun game. The one thing I did learn on this is that those holographic displays that you see in all the Marvel movies, it's like trying to focus on a shop window, you go cross-eyed. So we ended up kind of, it would never work in the real world. So came up with the kind of system of panels and this kind of 80s retro kind of vibe to get this one out for PSVR launch. From there, having learned how to blow up golf balls, we then went back to familiar territory of blowing up cars, created a huge thing called Danger Zone, which was a big interior kind of crash test facility. Similar to the Burnout 3 takedown crash mode, you drive a car into a junction full of traffic, bounce it around, cause as much damage as possible. So that was tremendous fun. I got the opportunity to play around with all the graphics of the HUD and everything. The coders gave me access to all their data, so I could actually write all of these cool things that gave you actual proper plots and readouts and stuff. So I geeked out on doing this kind of Tony Stark interface with all the animating bits and pieces for that one. 2018, we then decided to take it out on the open road, one of which is replicating junctions, so the one outside of LAX, most notably the M6 junction outside of Stoke. And basically that got us the opportunity to try and start building real-world environments, real-world looking vehicles. I started my obsession with truck liveries. I now cannot go down a mile on the M1 without thinking, I know how the Eddie Stobart got that graphic or whatever, because I've probably parodied about the best part of 100 articulated lorry things. And of course, these things now, because the resolution is so high, you have to employ exactly the same Adobe Illustrator techniques as you would if you were doing a real truck trailer. So if I ever wanted to retrain and stick big graphics on the side of trucks, I'm your man. So yeah, Danger Zone 2, we went off this and say, I can't unsee van and lorry liveries now. I was recently in Italy and walking past the thing, I was like, hang on a minute. I know that van, and I'd actually parodied it for recreation. It's some kind of telecoms van that I'd seen it and literally parodied everything. And James was like, really? So yeah, 2019 we went and did Dangerous Driving, which was circuit racing. It was the next evolution in going racing, where you can crash, bash, take down and things. I planted more flipping signposts and lampposts than I can possibly remember whilst doing all the HUD work and everything like this. Yeah, landscape manipulation, everything, but this was kind of taking us, again, each game being a stepping stone on from the last. And then in 2029 to 2023, recreation. This started out as Dangerous Driving 2. The week before the COVID lockdowns, I was out in Boston. Actually, we were selling it as Dangerous Driving 2. We all moved completely online because the guys had an office down south in Petersham. They closed that, and we actually worked better all from home than some of us in office and some of us working from home. And the game started getting bigger and bigger. The day that we realized that we can actually place objects in real time whilst we're in the multiplayer game, and came up with a system called Live Mix, where basically you and 8 friends can be driving around and you can go, okay, then let's create a race. You put down some ramps, I'll put down a start point, you put down some checkpoints. I can build massive tracks into the sky with loop-the-loops, hoops to jump through and all that lot. And basically, you can be building the track and racing around it, or deleting parts of the track whilst people are doing it, all in real time playing together. And so the idea of recreation is that you have this gigantic 21 by 21 mile square world, which has got hundreds of miles of routes, where you can go in and rename the roads, you can customize as much as we could possibly put into it. And we'd actually got to a point with the game where it was getting so big, it was like, do we release it half finished? Alex and Fiona actually got us funding from THQ Nordic, and I'm pleased to say that in a couple of weeks' time, THQ Nordic will be finally publishing it after having worked on it. But yeah, so 2019 to 2023, I'm working on this one, doing all sorts of stuff. I researched roller coaster curves and backwing curves, Immelman rolls and all that lot, and built all of these constructions. Had a great time. But my finance guy said, you know, you can retire. I was like, so I told the chaps that I could do that in about 2021. And eventually, when we were kind of looking at this thing going on for another 2 years, it was like, do I want to spend another 2 years behind the desk, or do I move and do some of the other things that I want to do in my spare time? So kind of said after 40 years later, it was kind of time to take a change. So for 18 months afterwards, I was semi-retired. I helped the guys out, finish a lot of the features that I'd been working on. I'm very proud to say that my son came on as a coder on the team. He'd worked for Free Radical on Time Splitters too, and literally as I announced my retirement, he came in and went, I'm going to be made redundant. And my friends on the thing went, what does he know about Unreal 5? So, more than you do. Right, we're having him. So he's now actually finishing off the code. He's a much better coder than I ever was. And the conversations we have, how's it going, is on the moon in comparison to where I am. I'm sort of hanging on with my fingernails trying to understand what he's talking about. But really, really proud to say that these guys are going to finally get this game after many years, 6 years, longest game I've ever worked on in my career, launching it. It's going to be a ton of fun. I'm looking forward to joining them. So what do I do now I'm fully retired? Well, I've been spending a lot of time focused on my health. That's my doctor, Dr. Ben, who is absolutely brilliant. I just love working out, getting out in the outside, and spend a lot of time working out in the gym because it's just great, and I want to have many, many more years to keep going. I do a lot more for myself now. I do kind of a load of pin-up stuff. With our local burlesque group does life drawing, so I do this. I've been doing loads of stuff. My antidote to doom scrolling on my phone is to take sketch cards around and draw in the coffee shop and then take photos of them. And there's a load of stuff that you'll never see online that I've been painting as well, which isn't suitable for general audiences. I've had the opportunity to revisit some old characters, cover art for Switchblade. Done one of these. I'm proud to say that we've sold the final version, final copy of this limited print of Rick. So I'm now looking for a new limited edition print to paint. And also create some cover art for some old games, old and new. Say, just on the cover art there for Passion Amiga, which is an Italian Amiga magazine, where I got to revisit every character from every Amiga game. And I can tell you, painting all them keys was an absolute nightmare. I was in fear of somebody coming up going, actually, the Amiga 500 didn't have that. I've passed that test. I got away with it. Painted the cover for Wolfchild that didn't look like the guy off the chorus ad for Amiga Addict, and also was even asked to do the thing for a new Dizzy game that came out earlier this year, Fast Food 2, which was real fun and a real honour to do, having met the Oliver twins, which are lovely guys, and to be asked to actually take somebody else's beloved character and bring him to life. And then the other thing I also discovered when I turned 50, 10 years ago, Jane got us some tickets to Star Wars Celebration. I like Star Wars, never been a real sort of like focus after being a little kid. But within about 2 weeks having the tickets, I was like, it'd be really, really rubbish if we went in jeans and t-shirt and everybody's having fun. So I built us some Mandalorian costumes. And then I met all the lovely people that raise money for charity and everything like that kind of thing. And so have built things. And so kind of probably about 10, 12 times a year, myself and Jane, we get together with our friends and we have raised money for children's cancer charity. We do various different conventions and stuff like that kind of thing. All nerds, all really happy to show the things that we've made and share them. And you spend the whole day just smiling from behind a helmet and getting away with kind of blue murder when it comes to putting on a stormtrooper and going to the biggest guy in the room going, hey buddy, on your knees, like this kind of thing, thinking he would kill me if I walked up to him and did that. I finally got myself a lightsaber. I also have built my own R2-D2 and stuff from there. I've also had the opportunity to share my knowledge in the classroom. Confetti College in Nottingham asked me to come talk to their design students and said, but you also do some cosplay stuff. Could you do something? So I actually came up with a course for them, which was how to use cosplay how to use game design techniques and production art design techniques to do cosplay stuff. So I actually showed them a load of techniques of how you would decide a world, say something like Fallout, analyze how the art style works, what the objects are, and if you were designing the object for the game, how that would factor in. But what we actually did was took Nerf guns and modified them to look like guns from your favorite game franchise, and I ended up making some subsequently some YouTube videos to go with the course, and now I have a YouTube channel, so please like and subscribe, comment if you like one of the videos, where I've now taken it to share some of the goofy little prop projects I've done, because I've taken loads of photos over the years and thought, actually, I might as well combine this because I'm living with these objects, and so that's me on YouTube. And the other thing it's afforded me to do is to be able to share this story around the world. I was asked a few years ago, would you like to come and speak to people about what you've done? I was like, well, I'm in the thick of it. I don't want to be that one guy that made a game in the 80s and that's it. He's still playing with his band in the studio, new album coming out. But since I've retired, I've kind of taken up the option because I've kind of discovered that a lot more people out there remember the games that I kind of thought, I thought they were all just going to die with each one of the machines. So there's the Cave, Debug U in the UK, and then Italy in Spoleto last year. I got contacted by a guy who runs an Amiga group in Italy and said, we'd love for you to come out to Spoleto, a little place in Umbria, and met a load of Italian fans, all guys like yourselves, who came to me and were like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Your games mean so much to me. When Gabriel put his arm around me and said, I can remember my brother by playing your games. I lost him. So I went up into the attic, got out the Amiga, dusted it off, and when I play your games, he sat beside me I was in bits. I was in tears all night. And I'd realised that there was something that I'd never experienced in the whole of this, which was when I was making the games, I was just praying and thinking, oh my God, I hope I don't get fired. I hope the game's okay. I hope I can still pay for my house. I hope they'll let me still do it. I hope the company's not going to sack me or go under. And I was content with the fact that each machine came out and it would die. Unlike pop records, which would go through various different kind of things, the games were always tied to a particular format. So when the Amiga and the Atari disappeared, that was just progress. What I didn't realise was that every little line of code, every little pixel that we'd been privileged to make was putting out a small piece of joy out into the world to people that we'd never met, never might meet. And on that afternoon in Spoleto, all of that stuff started coming back to me, and people telling me their stories and how it just touched my heart and moved me, and it's still choking me up thinking about it now. And so I'm so grateful for everybody who comes to say thank you. And I've met throughout the world who share their stories and everything, who are keeping those old games alive for all of us that made them. And yeah, thank you so much for coming here and allow me the time to give you the story of this crazy roller coaster that I've been on. But thank you very much.